Welcome, one and all, to the MIRTH Web Show. My name is David Batterina, and for the next hour, I'll be your host through the mayhem and insanity of exploring all things creativity. This show exists to help you, the creator, connect with fans, friends, and peers by showcasing not just your work, but your brain, your creative process, and your personality. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. We're streaming Tuesdays and Thursdays, except not Halloween, because nobody's going to watch. As well as some group shows planned for the occasional Saturday night. We have one coming up this Saturday, in fact. Over the next hour, expect some deep conversation, lighthearted fun, and prying open the creative brain of my very special guest, Miss A.M. Burk. Abby, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, David?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited, even though there was a spoiler right before I got on here, and I'm salty about it now. No, it's all good. And just like every show, we've had some technical difficulties, but we got it all worked out. It's 8:02. I'm happy. You should be happy.
Yeah.
We're good. I'm looking forward to a fun hour. It's weird now doing these because now, like, I'll have somebody on and they're like, "Oh, I've watched a couple episodes." Like, well, that's kind of strange, but I guess that was sort of the point of this whole thing, you know.
They're really good. I haven't finished all of them, but I've been really enjoying them.
Hey, it's all good. We've been having a lot of fun. So like I'm digging it. It's just like onward with it all. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you know how this is going to go. The first thing I'm going to do is ask you a minute's worth of this or that questions. It gives us a chance in just a very condensed period of time to get to hear some of your points of view on things. You know, and before I even start the timer, go ahead and ruin it for me. Go ahead and ruin my night, Abby. Hot air balloon or janky submarine. It's hot air balloon.
Hot air balloon.
I know. Well, you know what? It's okay. Like, we're a rare breed, us submarine people.
I want to hear your logic for that.
What's it?
I want to understand your logic, like why the submarine? Because I feel like the hot air balloon makes more sense, and I'm curious.
Okay, so here's the thing. If I'm going to be in either a questionable submarine or a questionable, I see homemade as questionable, right? Because I've made things and they're all questionable. So I see homemade hot air balloon. When that goes wrong, like I have terror plummeting to earth, right? And I don't want to. Like that's a period of time I'd rather not experience. If you're in a janky submarine and you're way down there, like it's pretty much over before your brain realizes it's over. So I'm like, you know, and plus like giant squid and stuff like that, you can't see those in the air. If you could, like, everything would be really weird. Yeah, see, team janky hot air balloon. That's that's it. It's fine. We already have people giving us crap in the chat, giving me crap in the chat. That's fine. All right. So let me ask the rest of these, right? Okay. So we'll go through these. Here we go. So we're going to go roughly 60 seconds or so. And I'll say board games or video games.
Ooh, video games.
Video games it is. Oppressive heat or bone-chilling cold?
Cold.
That was a quick answer.
I live in Texas now. I'm from New York and I live in Texas now.
There it is. All right. UFOs or Bigfoot?
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. Quiet morning or quiet evening?
Quiet evening.
Okay. Time travel or teleportation?
Time travel.
Let's go vampires or werewolves?
Ooh. Let's do werewolves.
Werewolves. Team Jacob. Okay. Cake or pie?
Cake.
Cake it is. Treehouse or an igloo?
Treehouse.
Yet you like the cold.
I like the cold.
Let's go with orcses or hobbitses?
Ooh, hobbitses.
Hobbitses it is. And let's see. We'll do Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Personal driver or personal chef?
Personal chef.
Personal chef. I don't want to cook. And then lastly, I'll do magic or technology?
Magic, definitely.
Magic it is. All right, good. I think just about everything if I had to guess your answers, I think I would have had like an 80. Like I would have gotten it about right. You know, I think I had it. I know a lot of New Yorkers and I have a lot of New Yorker family, so I'm gonna just like chalk it up to that.
There you go. I've been in Texas a long time now, though. So I have a bit of the Texas accent now.
Do you go back to New York at all or no?
Very infrequently. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins all of my family, other than my parents and siblings, still live up there. So when I can, I try to get up there to see my family. And I think some of them are watching right now. Hi.
Oh, well, hi, everybody. That's good. That's good.
But I love Texas. I just don't like the heat. I don't like the heat. It's like almost 90 degrees here, and it's 2 days away from Halloween.
Seriously?
Seriously.
That's yeah. I drove through snowy mountains yesterday, so like that's what it's like. I mean, it's New England. Like there's a difference.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is give you the floor, right? 30 seconds, time is all yours, and just introduce yourself, say hi, what you're working on, what you do, a little bit about you, whichever, and just go ahead, free form it. Off you go.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Abigail or Abby or A.M. Burk, whatever you want to call me by. I am a Christian. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I have a whole bunch of animals, which one of them is right back there. I'm hoping he won't invade too much on the stream, but we will see. I feel like he's back there plotting. And I'm a writer. I write in just about almost every genre, except I don't write anything too spicy. I prefer to go with the old black and white movie style of a closed door can tell you a lot. But right now I'm working on a speculative sci-fi novel over the morality of time travel and the importance of choice in time travel. I am hoping to have that done early next year, and then hopefully querying and getting it to publishers next year. I'm hopeful. And then on the complete opposite side, I also write children's books. So I have 5 children's books written at the moment, hopefully slated for publication or like late this year or early next. I think that we're planning for beginning of December for the first one, hopefully. And one of those is actually has got a pending deal with a pretty major IP. Like I'm not legally allowed to share yet, but we're talking like tens of millions of people that like that. So I'm really excited about that. I really wish I could share that, but can't quite share that yet.
Is it just really hard being tight-lipped about that? Like,
it's so tough. It's so tough, especially because I felt like I was shooting. Like I was just like I was like, okay, I'm gonna send this email, send this pitch. Like there is no way. I'm not even gonna get a response. This is such a big IP. There's no way I'm gonna get a response. And then I got a response back in like 5 minutes. They're like, we're in, and I'm like, okay. And now and that was back in June. And so the legal process of it takes forever. And so I'm still just over here going, I am allowed to share it with individuals, but not publicly yet. And so, but working on that. And yeah, I'm also working on putting some short stories, novellas, novelettes, that kind of thing up on Kindle. I think it's Kindle Vella, but none of that's up yet. The best way to stay in touch and be able to see my stuff is through social media. I'm at author A.M. Burk on all social medias, and I'm got cat videos up there, and I'll be posting more cat videos and more dog videos if you want. We have a zoo. We have 4 dogs, 5 cats, and a bunch of fish.
Oh, wow.
So we have a literal zoo. So if you want to see fun animal videos, especially animals reviewing books, check it out.
Awesome. And I've got your links on the videos, so in the descriptions and all that kind of stuff. And so we've got you connected, and you're on the Discord, which is cool too. So we get to hang out, and hopefully, I got to have you back on whenever you're ready to drop this news of like what's going on.
I would love that. I'm really hopeful it'll be soon.
Yeah.
It's just legal it always takes longer than you think it will.
For sure. It's a lot of back and forth and all that kind of stuff, but it sounds like you've got good stuff going, which is really cool. So I'm eager to dig in to your creative process, especially because it's like every new episode I have somebody on that does something a little bit different. And so kids books, that's one I'm curious to dig into. And you mentioned something about, was it narrative work in video games or something along those lines?
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
So go ahead.
No. Go explain just like what is that? Let's touch on that real quick.
Yeah, I was a narrative lead for a video game company on one of their projects for probably about a year and a half. And then I ended up resigning because I was recovering from ACL reconstruction surgery, and I had a little one and another little one on the way, and decided okay, I want to be able to take more time to work on my personal projects rather than keep working on the video games. But basically what I did was, my job was I worked with a game designer, and the game designer said, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is kind of the design I have. These are some of the key story elements I want. Like in this case, it was, they were like, well, I kind of want multiverse elements. And I would ask people, and they like, I'd get kind of like almost like a mood board of like, oh, hey, we want, you know, Minions meets Lego movie meets like, and that kind of thing. And then I'd be like, okay. And so I would take all of that, and then I would come up with a general story and then pitch that to them. And then depending on what they liked or didn't like it, I would tweak it. And then also it was interesting because we worked with it was a pretty active community that liked this video game company. And so they would always they had different memes and things in their chats that were specific to the game. So I would take a lot of the stuff from the community and figure out how to weave it into the narrative. And so I would both oversee the narrative, and I oversaw other writers as well, and saying like, okay, this is what we need to work on. This is the overall story we're trying to portray through these little missions and little quests and whatnot.
Right.
And also, we were a pretty small team. I think at the most we had like 3.5 writers. We had one that doubled as a community manager, and so at most we had 3.5 people on the team. So I also was doing a lot of writing as well. So I would write a lot of character interactions and descriptions, and we also would help with a lot of promo for anything, any writing that we needed as far as promotions, marketing, etc. We did that related to the game.
Right. Very cool. I have to just hit on a couple of comments real quick.
I know there's been some pretty funny ones.
I know Jacqueline. So she's that's my fiance Jacqueline. So she's in New York visiting family. So fellow New Yorker there. Yeah, after our last episode, the Minions came up, but they were like the whole sexy Minions thing.
Yes.
So I'm like, I did not expect Minions to come up again, but like in a totally different form.
Completely different form. But maybe that's why I have Minions on the brain. And also, my toddler is obsessed with Minions right now. She calls them Millions.
Millions.
She loves her Millions.
That's excellent. That's good. No, yeah, and he's been through the blown knee, like all of these things. These are the life things that happen as you're trying to like get work done and do and do you. So let me get into some of the creativity things.
Absolutely.
And approach these from whichever angle, whether it's, you know, the like narrative type work, or whether it's kids book type stuff, and feel free to touch on a little bit of everything as you go. But I guess in general, you know, the first question I'm going to ask, which is, when I say creative process, what is it? What does that look like for you? What comes to mind?
Yeah, for me, it definitely, I think of kind of the entire thing from brainstorming and figuring out that initial concept and idea to the actual implementation of it, actually sitting down and forcing myself to get it on paper. Yep. And then all the edits, and usually the going back and forth, because both with the video game and then also with these kids books, because I have, you know, of course, one that's with an IP, and then I have another one that we're in talks with the second IP. And so that second one, with both of those, I'm having to send the things they get back to me, and then I have to do edits and changes based off of their feedback. So there's a lot of editing and back and forth as well. But yeah, I kind of think about it from everything from that beautiful initial moment of, I've got this idea, and you're figuring it out, and all the light bulbs are going off, and you're like, yes, I've got this, to, oh, now I actually have to put it on paper, and I have to edit, and I have to format, and oh, is there a difference between tabs and indents, and all that.
Yeah. That's good. That's right. So it is like everything from your idea generation, like all the way throughout. So for you, where does inspiration tend to come from? I guess that's the first question. Let's try and go general and like zero in on some things. So when that idea happens, what are typically the circumstances around that?
Honestly, it just kind of depends. It depends kind of also on what I'm working on. So for kids books, for example, I have a 1-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. Okay. And so the kids books are usually like my almost 3-year-old coming up to me and being like, Mommy, I want a story about a princess who lives underwater, but she's not a mermaid. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to figure that out. Or both of these IPs that I'm working with are all things that my toddler has. They're not meant for kids, but she's fallen in love with and then been like, oh, explain this to me again. And I'm like, okay, after explaining it for the 100th time, I'm like, let's figure out a way to put it in a way that you can understand.
Yeah.
And then for, of course, video game, that one was a little bit different because I was working with a game designer, and the game designer usually had a lot of the ideas. And so it was getting inspiration from them and saying, okay, what are things that you like? If, for example, they said multiverse, I'm like, okay, multiverse, what are some examples of multiverses that you like? And then trying to narrow down and be like, okay, they like this part, but not this part, and this part, but not this part.
Right.
As far as my personal, my novels go, it's both like day-to-day life and just, I kind of keep track of just the weird events. I'm a bit of a people watcher. In another life, I was a registered nurse. So I got lots of interesting interactions there. And so I just kind of keep track. Sometimes even it's just, I have a weird dream and I'm like, ooh, there was some elements there. Let me take that. Let me get something from there that could literally be from anything, from the line of a song to something somebody says to somebody walking down the street looking like wearing a winter coat in the middle of July, anything like that.
It's a huge source for me is people watching. So I love to write in coffee shops and just like out and about. Because you have that time where even if it's something where I'm like really humming along and the words are just falling out of my head, there's always like a break or a pause of some kind where I'm just like, what's the right phrase for the next line, or what's the word I'm looking for, or what have you. And that's the time where I look up and just something weird is going to inevitably go on, and it's going to fascinate me to some degree. And I might put it in the story, like you never know. But that's very interesting to me. I've always had that sort of curiosity, I guess, watching people walk by and think like, what is that person's life like? Where are they going? What are they doing? What are their relationships like? Like all these questions just end up like spinning around. I do the same thing when I'm in an airplane. If I'm flying somewhere, I'm always looking down at the cities and thinking just like, what crazy stories are going on there right now? Like that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I totally get where you're coming from on that. So do you document stuff when you have like these kinds of ideas? Is it like an immediate documentation, or is it just like mental note, or something along those lines? Do you write stuff down? Like how do you make it concrete, so to speak?
Yeah. I try to write it down as soon as I can. I keep a bunch of notebooks. I take them with me everywhere. So that way I can try to write down. But sometimes it's, I put it on my phone as a note, or my poor husband, he puts up with me with being my notepad, and I'll just text him and be like, just ignore this. This is a notepad, but guy playing the cello in a subway or something.
Right.
Like, okay. So usually that's it. There are a few things that I just kind of keep in the back of my mind. I have to be careful because I have probably about 20 novels fully formed in my head right now, as well as kids' books and everything like that, and a bunch of stuff I'm writing. And if I'm not careful, and then I'll be like, oh, I want to write this one and this one and this one and this one. And I'm really trying to focus on, okay, let's get one project done at a time.
Right.
Not just
the professional writer route, which is like, I need to be responsible about my ideas. Yes. I can't write like the sloth with superhero powers has to wait, for this thing that's got. Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Exactly.
Is there a time of day where you feel more creative than other ones? I asked this one, is nocturnal, diurnal, or crepuscular, but like, are you a daytime writer, a nighttime writer? Is it just whenever you can get the words in and down? Like, is there a particular hour of the day where you feel like you're more creative than another one?
I think probably nighttime, honestly. Nighttime is usually when I when I have the most creativity, but I'm also usually shot by the time I get to nighttime after chasing the toddlers around. So I usually will write kind of whenever I have time. Right now, I usually work on my novel and like more in-depth stuff at night. And then my children's books, I actually work on during the day with my kids, because I can while they're doing something, I can scribble a couple lines down, and then I'll be like, hey, what do you think of this? And to quote my toddler, it bad. Again, please. It's bad, but I want to hear it again. So
sure.
with that. In an ideal world, like not ideal world, but before I had kids and I could write more, I would find that I could stay up late and brainstorm. And then when it came to actually like putting the words in paper on paper and like forcing myself to actually get several hours of writing done, I did better actually in the morning, just sitting down and being like, I'm not distracted, I'm just working. But as far as actual brainstorming and plotting and all of that, it's much better at night for me.
Yeah. I think the morning production for me is like, that's the best, and it's because then I feel like, I've got 2,000 words down. It's 11 a.m. I'm like, like the rest of my day is just so much easier. It's so much
Exactly.
less stressful because I have that behind me. But I totally understand that. What's the difference for you in terms of working on something that's a kid's book and working on a novel in terms of like planning or plotting or pantsing or whatever, however it is that you would go about it? What's the difference in that part of the creative process to structure a kid's story versus something longer and more adult oriented?
Yeah, so it's completely different. But the big thing, first of all, with a kid's story is figuring out what age range I'm looking at and whether or not I'm doing a rhyming story or an alphabet story or like a traditional, like once upon a time, there's this kind of story. If you're
Right.
writing for like a 2 or 3 year old, you're talking about less than 200 words, 200 to 300 words. So you're not working with very much. But then
Yeah.
if you're working with like up to like an 8 year old, you get about 1,000 words. And so the challenge there, it's much more like writing a short story where you have to create an entire story, have some sort of arc of some sort. Even for a kid's book, you want to have some sort of arc,
Right.
and then condensing it in such a way that they can understand it and see it. So for plotting out a children's story, it's usually a lot simpler, because I usually have a quick idea. It really isn't that long. For example, one of my children's books that will hopefully be coming out, this is the one I think will come out in December. My daughter was like, I want a story about a princess who lives in the ocean but isn't a mermaid. And so
Right.
we came up with a story and we're like, okay, she lives in a sandcastle. And really
Right.
quickly, it was easy to be like, okay, she lives in a sandcastle, but what's the problem with the sandcastle? The ocean's going to come knock it down. And so she has to make a friend and escape. Like it doesn't take very long to actually come up with the story. And then
Right.
planning it out takes a little bit longer, but it just depends basically if I'm doing a rhyming story, if I'm doing a rhyming story, that takes a lot more planning because I have to figure out what rhyming scheme I'm doing and then kind of how I want to divide it up. And then I have to actually work on the rhymes themselves.
Right.
For a regular kid story that's not rhyming, I pretty much do it like a regular short story. I just sit down, I write it all down, and then I come back and I work on it and say, okay, what would a kid understand? What would they not? How am I doing with my word count? That kind of thing. I'm working it down. So a novel is kind of like, to me, it's almost like each chapter of a novel is like that kid's story.
Yep.
You have to come up with your whole arc-ish, or at least your plan for where are we going from the start to the end of this chapter. And then you get it written down, and then you come back later and you tweak it and edit it and figure out what works and what doesn't. And then you repeat.
Right. Oh, for
You
sure.
repeat a whole lot. And so it's novels are a lot more complicated, which is, yeah, I've been
Right.
working on this time travel novel for off and on for about 10 years now. So
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
I'm hopeful that it's actually going to see the light of day next year. That is,
Right.
I think my husband and a lot of people would kill me if it doesn't actually come out.
Where are you landing on word count for this one?
It's currently it's going to be about 150K. And
Ooh,
it's
okay.
a chunky boy. And
Yeah, it is.
so I have to figure out what I'm going to do with that because a lot of agents want it under 100,000 for your debut novel.
Yeah.
But it's a time travel story, and it's a very complicated time travel story. And we're getting into a lot of alternate realities and alternate time streams. And so it's one of those things I could go through and I could like, okay, I could get rid of a word here and get rid of a word here, but I'm
For
not
sure.
thinking that there's huge chunks I can actually get rid of.
Yep.
But I'm not going to worry about that yet. I got to get it done and edited. And then I have an editor that I've signed up with for next March. And so she's going to hopefully also help me
Nice.
figure out if I should just keep it as is or if I should try to cut it. I think I lean towards I'll probably just keep it as like if I can't realistically get it down to 100,000, I'm not going to force it. I'd
For
rather
sure.
self-publish and keep the vision of it than change it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the novel and a half. Yeah, that's kind of a novel and a half. Yeah, I think my debut landed at 85. And then Space Pew Pew, which I just I've got coming out this month, is it was somewhere around that, like 80 to 85. And for me, it's just like that's the comfortable spot to write in to get the story out and all those kinds of things. I appreciate and like just kudos to you for putting something together that's in the 6 figures of words because that is really sturdy for sure.
Honestly,
But,
I
yeah.
didn't really have a choice. The characters were like, here's my story. This is what's happening. Do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. I'm like, I wish I could do the 85K. I love that. I think the 85K is like a really good range. Like I just read The Caretaker not too long ago, which
Yeah.
if anybody's in the chat and hasn't read The Caretaker, they should, because yeah, it's going up there as one of my favorites. I quite love that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's
but
really nice to hear.
It's a really good length, and so I love that. But with this one, with all of the time travel and everything, I just can't get it down. And I even tried breaking it up into multiple books, but I just couldn't. It's one major arc, and so it just doesn't fit very well. It's like the Two Towers, and it's like the Lord of the Rings, right? Like the Two Towers and Return of the King were never meant to be separate books, and so they actually don't have the traditional arc that, like, Fellowship of the Ring does, or The Hobbit. And so it's kind of like that. It's like I don't.
Yeah, sometimes the story needs to be told in the way it's going to be told, and like that's it's tough because sometimes those are decisions. It's right there. What you're struggling with is like it's for market, so you have considerations, and especially if you're going to be querying this novel, you're going to have to start explaining. All right, listen, like hear me out on 150,000. And that's one of that's just one of the things. But I feel like, and honestly, there are quite a few publishers and indie publishers and everything else where a lot of times they're looking for that. Like it needs to at least hit 100.
Yeah.
And they love to see like one, and like they love to see the first book and the second one right afterwards. And things like that. So it is tricky, but you do you on it, right? Like if the story's putting together and you're going through like that, and you're like, this is it. And if I'm just cutting words, I'm not cutting sections. Like more power to you, What about because you touched on it when you did your intro, and I'm curious because you mentioned the morality of time travel. And I'm just like, I need to dig into that for a minute. And like, can you just give me like a general idea of what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. It gets in, we always talk about, like, everybody talks about, like, oh, if you had time travel, should you go back and change something? Should you go back and kill Hitler and keep that from happening? But the whole idea too is, if you do that, if you go back and kill Hitler, first of all, it gets into the morality of, if you're killing somebody who hasn't yet committed the crimes that he's going to commit, is that justified or not? That they're going to commit it, but they haven't yet. And on the flip side of it, if you go back and you change something, especially if you change something that helps you or helps somebody you care about, but you can't predict what it will happen, what it will do to other people. So is it moral? Is it moral to change something to help yourself out if you don't know what it will do to other people? But on the flip side of that, if you know something bad is going to happen to somebody and you have the ability to change it and you don't, what is that moral either? Like, you get into a whole concept of what do you change and what do you not? And is it right to change something bad that is going to happen? Like, and you prevent that, but you could be causing something else to happen that could be worse.
Right. Yeah. I think digging into a novel length of those questions and answers is brilliant. Two movies that I really enjoy, because I love the Back to the Future movies. But that is a case of him, Biff helping himself, and then to the detriment of like society at large when they went into the future. But also Minority Report.
Exactly.
That was one that touched on that, like the whole pre-crime thing. Like, where's the line here? Because they haven't actually done anything, but you're certain they would, and I love the way they broke it down in that movie. One of my favorite Tom Cruise films, for sure. But that's good. Philip's asking, actually, this is a good one. time travel, how do you approach it? Timeline rewrite like Groundhog Day, or time marked Warlock, or splintered multiverse like Crichton's timeline. Any
So
thoughts?
I actually have not read Time March Warlock yet. So I don't really know 100% about the timeline that it uses, or the time travel it uses. But I actually kind of use a little bit of all of them. So how I approach it is I basically you have regular people who don't know. They don't know if time travel has happened. They don't know if changes have happened to their timeline. They just have always existed. You know, if something changes in their world, they don't realize anything's changed because for them, it's always been there.
Right.
And then you have some people that can actually, I call them time travelers. They can travel back and forth on time, but they can't actually change whatever's going to happen. So, you know, it's the whole, like, if you go back in time, you become your own grandfather thing. And you're always going to go back in time and become your own grandfather because you exist. You always are going to, like, you can't really change anything because it's already happened.
Right.
And so my version of time travelers are literally just people who can travel through time. They can see things, but if they affect anything, it's already happened. Like they're not, they can't really change the path that they're on. But then I also have specific people that I call time wanderers in this book. And they actually can go through, and they are the few that can actually completely change the time path you're on and go to a completely different timeline. Right. Exactly. And so the time travelers, for example, they may or may not be able to tell that a whole time stream has changed.
Right.
But the answer is I love all the different types of time travel, and I couldn't just pick one.
So let's approach this from the creativity standpoint, because now you're talking about interweaving all kinds of things, and some can be affected and some maybe not. And so all I see when all I can picture in my head, thinking of myself writing 150,000 words of time travel and timelines, is just like a party of continuity errors. So creatively, what do you do to ensure that you're not just running roughshod over the narrative that you've already established? Like, it's just as complicated as time travel, putting a book like that together. So were you scrolling notes? Were you like, just explain how that worked creatively for you?
I have so many notebooks of notes and diagrams and doodles.
Gosh.
And there are so many tears that have been shed over this. But basically, I think the good thing that started with this is that when I initially came up with my idea for it, it was a much smaller version. I had the general idea. I had, these are my general main characters, and this is generally what's going to happen. But it didn't have enough. It was a very basic thing. And I actually wrote a rough draft of that will never see the light of day because it's so horrible. But then when I started reworking it, then I started realizing, I'm like, but actually there's a continuity error here, and there's a continuity error here. And I really need this here. And so basically with every rewrite, I've kind of been working out those continuity errors. And it really helps as well that I've got several people that are my beta readers early on that are well-versed in time travel and are really good at keeping track of this. And so I'll have some of them who will be like, hey, was this intentional? Is this a secret for later? Or how did that work? Right. And so my brother-in-law, for example, loves time travel. And I know if I have a continuity error, he will spot it a mile away. Yeah. It's a blessing and it's a curse because as soon as somebody notices something, you're like, no.
Dang it. I got to rewrite. Exactly. Yeah, there's that. I have enough trouble just going through, like, if I'm looking at rough draft stuff and I might be like 5 chapters into something, I'm like, first chapter, he has blue eyes. Second chapter, he has green eyes. Third chapter, he has brown eyes. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So like I can keep it straight. Like I have a better system now for those types of things. But for something like complex like that, where you're weaving in timelines, it's like, oh my gosh, like that sounds exhausting. So kudos to you on that one.
Thank you.
So let me ask you some other just general questions about this.
Yeah.
So what about deadlines? When you're under a deadline for something, and I imagine, again, it's different for something like a kid's book than it is for like a long-term project where you're working on it for 10 years and all that. Like there's not really maybe there is, like, you have to get it to an editor in, what is it, May? March. Okay. So you got a few months to get it to an editor. So like there's a deadline there.
There's
Do you tend to work well under that sort of deadline, or are you better just letting it happen and letting the words come out and the story come out?
a little bit of both. I think there's pros and cons to both for me. I think honestly the deadline usually helps because if I don't have a deadline, that's part of the reason it's been 10 years and I haven't quite gotten this novel out yet. If I
Yeah.
don't have that deadline, it's a lot easier for me to go and say, I'm just staring at a screen. I'm not doing anything. I got 100 words out. What am I doing? I'm not going to do with it. I'm not going to deal with this for a few days.
Right.
If I have a deadline, then it's like, no, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write through this chapter, and it might be complete garbage. I may have to go through and completely change it later, but at least I wrote something down and I'm moving on.
Sure.
And so I'm not very good at hitting my timelines for my novel, but at least for the children's books and also for like when I worked in the video game industry, that really taught me a lot about deadlines, because for that you can go to your higher ups and say, hey, we're not going to hit this, but you better have a really good reason why you're not going to hit it. And so I kind of learned when I was working that no, when you have a deadline, you got to hit it. And sometimes that meant staying up way too late. It got exciting at times, but for me, having those deadlines does help. But for myself personally, I also have to be careful because I can make those deadlines the most important thing, and then I can like not take care of myself or get myself into a stressed mess and not be able to function.
Well, and then what are your cats gonna do?
Exactly.
And by the way, you threw that picture of one of your cats on the Discord, and that was hilarious. Just this large kitty. It was a large kitty.
She's huge.
She's huge. And just to describe it for those watching right now, the cat was in a box that it was crushing, basically, and the box was labeled heavy. And that's fantastic. I love it.
If you want to see it, I've posted the picture on both Instagram and also on Twitter. So you can find the picture. But yeah, that's my cat Ivy. She is, I think, about 18 pounds right now, 17, 18 pounds.
Gracious.
Yeah, we are working. She is on a diet. But the problem is that all of our cats insist on eating at the same time. So I have her. And then on the other side of the extreme, I have Elise, who is about this big. And maybe about this big around. She's barely 7 pounds, and I am like having to like force her to eat. And so trying to figure out how to make sure she gets enough, but Ivy does not.
Yeah, I'm sensing this weird parallel between Ivy and 150,000 word novel. I'm just saying, like there's like this, like the novel crushing a box. Like I could totally see that. Those two things together. That's fantastic.
I need to make that a meme now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Just like my novel.
Like my expectations, my novel.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you about this, just getting into some of the mindset of creating and how you work and all those different things. Can you recall a time for me where it was very difficult to create or, get anything out, in those terms, and what was life like for you, or what were some of the causes, and eventually how'd you move past it?
Yeah, I actually had a really bad like writer's block period of time for probably about 2 or 3 years actually.
Oof.
It was a while. And honestly at that time I had torn my ACL for the first time. I've had 2 ACL reconstructions. So I had torn up. Did I lose? Okay, you're back. I wasn't sure if my internet was acting up. The spooky wind might be causing issues.
Right.
I tore my ACL for the first time. I've torn it twice. I was doing martial arts the first time and blew out my knee. And so that was discouraging. And I was working as a nurse at the time, which was not creatively filling for me, but it was exhausting. And so I'd get home off of 12 to 15 hour shift, just was exhausted and just discouraged. And so I went through a phase where I was just like, I feel like I can't get the words out. And so I actually poured my creative energies at that time I did video game streaming. And so I streamed video games for a few years and worked on some other hobbies and whatnot. And then the writing projects were still in the back of my head, but I was just like, I don't know. I'm just burnt out and just I can't get the words out. And honestly, how I got them to work again was this is a very effective method, and I do recommend it. But I had my husband who was like, "No, your books are really good, and I'm not going to let you not write them." And he pretty much was like, "No, you are sitting in this chair and you are writing your books."
Yep. Go to your room.
Exactly.
Right.
And for me, that worked really well, because I was like, I couldn't have done it. Like he gave me that drive and that motivation to sit down and just get something down. And I'm a perfectionist by nature. So when I start writing, I'm like, but this is horrible. I'm going to have to rewrite it. I don't like it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't want to keep writing because I'm like, no, I want it to be perfect right now. And he really helped me move past that and just say, no, just get something down, anything down, and you can come back to it and edit it later. And that was a really, really hard lesson for me to learn because I like to write it and I like to have it perfect on the first try, but that's not how it works, especially when you're dealing with complex characters, complex situations. And I think the other issue with that as well, like the other thing that contributed to my writing burnout, or like my writer's block, was that I was at a point in the novel where I was writing some really intense emotional stuff. At least for me, when I am writing really intense situations, I'm writing characters going to the darkest parts of themselves. Yep. Right. Like I feel that like I have to kind of get into that mindset to write those characters. And that's a dark place to be in. And so it was one of those spots where I'm like, I don't want to write this. I don't want to write this one of my characters that is spiraling in a dark way. I don't want to write that. I don't want to be in that mindset. And so I kept kicking the can down the road. I'm like, I don't have to work on that. I'll write this other happy little scene later. Let me write the epilogue. Let me write the second to last chapter where we get the happily ever after or ish, whatever, like where we get like we start making everything all nice. And I just did not want to deal with my characters and their emotional struggles, but just forcing myself to sit down and work through that and get it done. And then to give myself some grace too when I got done writing that stuff and be like, I'm gonna feel like garbage after writing this garbage human being. You know, I'm going to feel bad when I'm writing these like, you know, character deaths or like you're going to feel horrible afterwards. And so just kind of also taking care of myself emotionally after I did that kind of thing was good too.
That is fantastic advice. Absolutely. A couple of things that I want to touch on just in that entire thing that you had mentioned, in terms of writing the darker moments on those characters and things like that. There's definitely, I've experienced it both ways in that it was very cathartic in some ways to get that out.
Yes.
And then in other ways, like I found myself writing that and just having to be quiet for a few days. I think it was just like I like it hit really close to home in such a way that you're like, I need a break.
Exactly.
And I'll get back to it. And I'm not going to get rid of those words. But like I need to step away for a moment. Exactly. And I think it's really critical to understand that just writing is inherently there's your subconscious is engaged in everything you're doing. Your intuition is engaged in everything you're doing. So like you're going to experience these things as you go. And then in terms of just like the perfectionism, so that is something that I have a very, very difficult time with. I don't want a rough draft. I want to just write the final draft and be done. And so for me, like I always end up taking a lot longer to write something, but when I spit it out, maybe I'll have 2 editing passes and I'm good. And I've found that like I can't work creatively in that just sort of like just throw down the rough draft. Like that just won't happen. So hearing you talk about that, I'm like, oh man, like that really does, like that resonates big time for me. There was somebody on Twitter had mentioned something earlier today. He put up a thing and he's like, I have this idea for this piece of software for writers where you write it and as soon as you write it, it disappears. Like that would be the most nightmarish piece of software I could ever, like I can't look at the last, this is a terrible idea. But there are so many people that it's just like that. They just want to be blind and get the story out. And I kind of understand that, because like you can't edit what you haven't written.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But no. Makes sense, but like I'm gonna say absolutely not, sir. You'll never be getting a dime of my money.
Exactly. Same. I
Yeah.
had somebody who was like, I had seen, years and years ago, somebody talk about the same thing where they put like paper up on their screen so you could only see like the last line you wrote. And I was like, no, I can't. I can't.
Set your font to white and then just write and hope it's there. Like I don't even like everything about that is just really terrible. But I find that with that knack for perfectionism, and I wonder if it worked this way for you too, where when you started to come around in that, there's this point where you're like, okay, I'm not going to focus on making it perfect. I'm going to keep writing, but I'm going to pay attention to, like, I'm going to be very intentional about my words.
Exactly.
Did you experience that?
Yes, definitely. And it was more of, I still knew, like in these chapters that I was stuck on, like I knew exactly what I was going for. I still knew general plot that I was working for. And I still tried to be very careful with how I wrote. But it was just more of, I knew, like, as I'm writing this, I'm like, it feels rougher than I want. Like, I know I've said the word said like 18 times in the last 2 sentences. Like, I know this is not, it's not flowing the way I want to. And it was actually interesting. There were a couple of chapters where I was just like, I'm just putting it out there and I feel like it's garbage. It's just not flowing. And then I actually came back and looked at it and was reading it to prepare for the next chapter I was writing. I was like, you know what? This is actually not that bad. This is actually really good. And so sometimes it's just a mental block, at least for me, where I'm like, it feels bad. But when I come back, it's actually not that bad. But I also keep notebooks with me all the time. Like when I'm writing, I have like a pretty good, like I keep legal pads. That's usually what I like to do. And so I have all these notes for my next editing pass. So it's things like, if I write a chapter and I'm like, oh, actually this character should be having glasses, instead of like going through then and then changing all of the times up to that point where this person should have worn glasses. I just write a note for myself of, hey, when I'm editing, give her glasses and all the spots.
Right.
Because in the past I would have just gone back and be like, oh no, I got to change all of that right now. And I found that it just takes me out of the writing and then I never make progress.
No, I do this essentially the same thing, and just I use Ulysses to write, so it's a lot like Scrivener. It's one of those, just for Mac, and it does all the backups and everything. But for that, I have a separate sheet that I'll go to, and I have to make a very concerted effort. It's whatever thought I have of something that I have to take care of and remind myself of, I have to write it down right now.
Yes.
And as long as I do that, like, I'm okay. And I'll go back through that list of things that I need to change, double check, references, go back to chapter 13, just like double, make sure of this. It's really funny because when I go back, I find I'm like I forgot. Like I forgot all of this. Like, so thank goodness past me, now we're getting back into timelines, knew that future me was just like being a forgetful idiot, and had to write that stuff down. What about music? Are you a listen to music while you write person, or are you writing in silence? Or
I do not like writing in silence. I gotta have music playing of some sort, usually instrumental. I don't usually like music with words unless I'm brainstorming, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But I prefer instrumental. Usually it's classical works. Like, I mean, I go on Spotify and I just look up like classical piano for writing, and that usually brings up a whole bunch of stuff. Or sometimes if I know like I'm trying to get into a specific mood, like I'll even pick up pop artists and be like, okay, piano covers or instrumental covers of this artist, and that can help me get into the right like mindset. I also really like movie soundtracks and anime soundtracks. I've been listening to a lot of anime soundtracks lately. Attack on Titan soundtrack it's
really okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you're an anime.
Listen, I have a quick Attack on Titan story for you, because everybody had been like talking about it, and I'd never seen any of it or anything like that. And there was just this one night, and I was by myself, and I was home, and I'm like, like I was just feeling like a little anxious, and it was like kind of late, and I'm like, I need to run down and watch some anime. And so I'm like, I'll just throw on it, like it's a cartoon. Like, what's the, and then they start like chewing on the people, and I'm like, oh my God, like that was a really bad night. Yeah, I don't really remember the music. All I remember is just like that horrifying visual and being like,
And
I don't really ever need to watch. I'm a Cowboy Bebop kind of guy, you know, or just like Aang and Sokka and
yes,
like the last, like that's just really nice, you know. It's funny, like the boulder and the whole thing. Like, yeah,
exactly.
I'm more for that than I am anything else. But yes, some epic music like Final Fantasy soundtrack, things like
Exactly.
that are just like they're really grand. Like I totally get that.
Yes.
Um,
I think
and I've done
Stage
both
got
too.
good music.
Some
Yeah.
of the pop stuff, like I can't. It really depends. If whatever I'm listening to while I'm writing, it has to have very limited lyrics, if any. And I like I like complex music, so like I'll listen to Tool and stuff like that. Like I like that a little bit harder, like a little bit with an edge, you know, and different like things just to kind of keep the brain engaged. But again, like I'm constantly searching for something new to listen to because I don't want to get sick of anything.
Mhm.
You know, and there's certain things that you can and certain, like, you know, I'm not going to be like, oh, I have this emotional scene between these two characters, I'm gonna throw on Mambo number 5. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't work, you know. So, so yeah, Please traumatized. I haven't shut up about the whole Attack on Titan thing. That was a really bad night. I'm just
No,
saying.
and I know exactly what you're talking about because that like it's an amazing show, but that the first couple episodes are meant to be
Ooh,
so traumatizing and so dark. And then
yeah.
it gets a lot better until the
Okay.
very end, and then it gets a lot more dark, but it's trying to get you into these characters' mindsets of this is the world they live in, this is the real fear and everything. But it's dark, and then
I'll
it gets
take the word.
better, and then it
Yeah.
gets dark.
Right.
But yeah, you do have to be in the right mindset for it. But
For sure. So you'll listen while you write, and so classical soundtracks, movie soundtracks, that kind of thing, like Lord
yes.
of the Rings, like that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
Lord of the Rings is great. I
It is
also
very good.
I love the Interstellar soundtrack for when I'm writing time
Oh,
travel.
nice.
It's got
Yeah,
like
that's
a
a
lot
good
of
one.
it's got a lot about time in that, and so that one's really good. Yeah, video game soundtracks are excellent. My husband loves listening to Pokemon while he's working on his video games. So, like he's a programmer, and so
Okay.
I've gotten to the point where I've learned to really love Pokemon instrumental music.
Nice.
Um, but and then what I also do is I create playlists actually for each of my characters that are
Okay.
private, and I put songs, even songs with lyrics on them that inspire me about that character. So that way, if I'm just going about my day and I'm trying to, if I'm noodling on like a problem with a character, or if I'm trying to get into their mindset, then I
Right.
have a playlist I can put on of like, oh yeah, these are the songs that inspire me or make me connect with this character. And specifically, I do that for the novels, not for not for the
Right.
kids' books, but
Oh,
that
for
really
sure.
helps me as well. Because sometimes I'm dealing with these characters, and like I mentioned, I'm dealing with different timelines and past, present, future, all this stuff. And so one
Right.
person, like I think I heard a statistic the other day that like a person will like when you're married to a person, it's kind of like you're married to 20 different people throughout their lifetime because
Interesting.
of how much people change throughout their lives.
For sure.
And so, and I might be misremembering that statistic, but you know, when I'm writing with these characters that I'm working with their entire lives, where they are at one point is very different from where they are 10 years before. And so having a playlist for me to be able to get into their mindset at different points helps. But I can't write to lyrical music. I have to have just purely instrumental.
Right. Right. I've tried. It's, you know, I'll listen to some like just to kind of set the stage before I start with something. You okay, so the caretaker actually is a great example because there's a scene where he first meets where he first goes to Love Park in Philadelphia,
Yep.
and there's all these love references and all these references to these songs. That was a huge playlist of just every song that I could find. Like, you know, Nat King Cole was in there, and I've got Al Green going. I've got, you know, The Cure, like all those. So it's like that. I was sitting there just deliberately listening and then picking out the lyrics and being like, yes, like that put me right there in that scene. Like now I can write that, and then it's time to just move on to something else. So like, yeah, it's almost like using it like a tool in a lot of
Exactly.
ways, which is really great. Yeah, and actually, this is a good suggestion too. Songs in another language. I have a few bands that are actually like they sing in French,
Ooh.
and there's just something about it. It's almost like a French kind of like hip hop in a weird way, but not with a lot of lyrics. And that one, those are really good. And it's just like a little bit different. I listen to a lot of world music actually, because like I have a background in jazz. So like, I'll throw on like just whatever. But those are good. Philip, you mentioned the Joy Formidable. You're gonna have to send me a link because I'm curious if you got suggestions for sure. So let me ask you a couple more things. What about we talked about the time where you had like some difficulty writing and things like that. What about a time where it was just like the floodgates were open and everything's getting created and like almost not enough time to get all the ideas out, when you felt like you were at a creative high point? What was life like at that point, and how do you keep that rolling?
Yeah. So I can think of a couple of points, like definitely recently, actually, when I never planned on writing kids books. I originally, like, I was like, no, I'm working on my novel. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll just write just 2 kids books a year, like to give to my kids on their birthday kind of thing. And then I started getting these ideas for the IPs while I was working on my time travel novel. And all of a sudden things were flowing and I'm like, I got to start carrying notebooks with me. I just can't get this stuff down fast enough. And it's really fun. And then the other time I think was before I had kids. I can remember when I was working as a nurse and I would work, 3 12 to 15 hour shifts. Right. So I had a couple days that were completely off. And I remember at one point going to a coffee shop and I'm like, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to work. I had an idea for a ghost story, like a ghost novella. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll just see how much I could do. And I just sat there all day and like wrote the entire thing. And like today I'm like, wow, I don't know how I did that, but that's awesome. Can I do that again? Can I have that again, please? But I feel like those times are more far and few between in terms of like pure inspiration. A lot of times I have to kind of force it but when I have those times, like, especially when I started coming up with these children's books ideas and also working on the Inventor at the same time, it was really nice because I'd be like, my poor husband, he's very patient with me, but I'd be in the shower and I'd be like, I gotta go write this down. He'd be like, okay, let's go to bed now. And we'd curl up in bed and then I'd be like, I gotta go write this down. I have ideas. And then I'll wake up and be like, and I'd have like, there'd be times even that I'd wake him up and be like, I've got this great idea. You want to hear it? And he's like, it's 2:00 in the morning.
No. Right.
Like, he's like, I do want to hear it, but
yeah. Exactly. Write a note and they give you the notepad by the bedside, I guess, like, and just like scroll it down.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I've done that one. Actually, here's a really good question. Brenna asked, in a time travel book, do you write cover to cover or by timeline? I really thought about that. So like, what's your answer here?
And I'm giggling a little bit because Brenna is actually my sister and she's one of my beta readers and she doesn't know what's going to happen yet. So I think she's also like, what information can I have? Generally with this kind of thing, I'm actually writing cover to cover because I'm trying to come up with this. It still has to be a story, even though you're dealing with all these timelines and whatnot. You still have to have it be an actual arc. So it makes it a little bit difficult. It's a lot more complicated, but you still have to have somebody that you're following ish or multiple people that you're following and, the problem and your resolution and all of that. And so I know how complicated it is. And I know how many timelines are going on and all of this craziness. But my job as a writer is to take this really crazy story and all of these timelines and all of these little things that happen and be able to turn it into something that somebody can sit down and read and understand, especially somebody who's not familiar with time travel. I want to write a book that somebody who hasn't watched Minority Report or hasn't watched all of these regular time travel shows, who don't really know the difference between the different styles of time travel, that they can understand. And so because of that, I'm pretty much writing cover to cover. But what she's also getting at is, how I've got my chapters laid out is I actually split every chapter between 2 time periods. And so I'm going to call it the main time period that you're following. Usually it's the present, and that takes up about 75% of each chapter. Okay. And then at the end, there's a 25% point that's from like a future, and like, all the future ones line up together and, that roughly. And so in that case, I think she's more asking, like, when I'm writing this, do I write all of the future stuff together as like one big thing and all the present stuff and all the past stuff do I write it as one big story and then kind of piece it all together? And the answer to that is I usually still write chapter by chapter, even though I'm writing a little bit each time in a different time period.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, I'll go ahead if I really feel like, for example, my future sections, I'll say, I feel like the characters are really flowing and they're making sense, then I might do 2 or 3 chapters worth. I'm like, okay, I'm in these characters' mindsets. I know what's happening. But usually I try really hard to write them chapter by chapter. So that way I can kind of keep track of where I am and not get too bogged down in one thing versus the other. If I find in one of my rough drafts, earlier drafts, I actually wrote much more of like, I'm just writing this timeline and I'm not worrying about these other timelines. And what I found with that is when I did that, I didn't want to write the other timelines. I didn't feel as connected to them. I didn't feel as connected to the characters. I didn't have the big picture that I needed to have to be able to tell the story.
Right. Another question here from Philip, which is with physical copy notebooks. This is something that I was wondering too. Have you ever lost one? Because life with kids can be like trying to solve a Penn and Teller trick when things go poof. Yes. So yeah, have you ever had a situation where some precious words that are down are just gone?
Yes. Like I try really hard to write, like, so usually right now with notebooks, my notebooks I'm primarily using for my kids' books. And because that way I can carry them around, but I still try as soon as I can to transcribe it onto the computer. Right. So that way I have another copy of it. But I definitely lose it. I think in the last like 10 to 12 years, I've moved maybe 6 times. A lot. I've moved a lot. Now, some of that's just been moving from apartment to apartment or house to house. And so I have lost stuff. For example, after I'm done with the Inventor, one of the things I want to write is it's a fantasy series that gets into really the politics of different kingdoms. And I actually I drew from by hand a map of the world and all of this stuff. I can't find it. Oh, no. I can't find it. I'm still looking for it. I'm hoping it's somewhere. But that whole notebook where I put it, I have no idea where it is.
Somewhere. So, it exists.
It exists. I'm hoping it exists somewhere in my house. Right. And if that happens, you're just kind of like, you cry, and then you're like, okay.
Real life fiction espionage. That is, it's about right. That was one of the advantages actually, that was one of the reasons that I chose Ulysses as the writing app, because it backs up to iCloud, because it's Mac. I write on Mac. It backs up to iCloud. It's synchronized instantly to my phone, my Mac. If I have a tablet, it'll be on there and it's backed up. And so I've got it locally and on the cloud and on every device all at the same time, which is fine because when you edit, like if it's 2 a.m. and I open my phone and I make a note and I put my phone down, I know that in the morning when I sit down at the actual computer, it's there. It's updated. It's good. Everything's cool. The only problem is if you're disconnected and you write something and then you're connected to some other device and you write something and all of a sudden you have now I've got a split timeline. Right now I am literally time traveling through my own work and it's miserable. So yeah. And yes, it is heartbreaking to lose the creative work. I think we've all pretty much been. I hear so many horror stories, people that are just like, even with something like Google Docs, it's just gone. But where?
It terrifies me. It terrifies me. Right now, I do write primarily in Google Docs, and my husband and I are trying to figure out some good backups for that, because I'm like, if I lost, for example, my 100, it's currently like 110,000 words, something like that. If I lost all of that, I would cry.
Yeah, it's not really practical to just like hit print on 150. I have a backup copy, like these 3 reams of paper or what have you. There's that. So let me ask you one more question, then I want to get into some fun pitch storm stuff with you. Right. So the last one I want to ask you is there anything that you would change about how you work creatively, whether it's, your efficiency, how flexible you are with your time or anything like that, or your output? Like if there's something that you could change, what would you change?
That's a good one. I think my biggest thing is like I wish I wasn't quite so perfectionist. Like I really do wish I could write and let it be rough and just let it get down. And then like I'm doing better with it, but I still it drives me nuts. And like I no, I have to make every sentence grammatically correct and I have to make it like I have to it's going to be my final draft, even though I know it's not. And so I wish that I was a little bit um more flexible with that.
Yeah.
That's definitely the biggest thing for me. And then I just wish I wish too that I'm like I could get the words from here onto the paper quicker. Uh, but that's also part of just life, having two little ones and balancing all of that.
Yeah, it is. You have a lot of. I mean, there's just a lot of concerns for all of us. There's like whether it's a day job or it's the kids or it's the doing this or it's the just all the little things like the car needs to go in and get an oil change and I got to go get groceries and it like all those things end up piling up and just steamroll whatever intention you have to get words down. But I would say honestly, if if I'd answer that same question, I'd answer it the same exact way. It's being less of a perfectionist with those things and just allowing the words to flow out a little bit because that makes everything a little bit faster. It's just I just don't want to do it. That's all it comes down to for me. I'm like, no,
Exactly.
I need it to look a certain way. Do you read your work out loud?
I do. Usually I read it out loud when I'm editing. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm actually in the middle of writing it, but I always will read it out loud at least once, usually multiple times when I'm editing, because I find that when I read it out loud, I catch things that I didn't.
You kept so much. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dialogue tag placement. I mean, like that's a big one for me. I'm like, I like this makes sense when I'm reading it one character to the next, but then like I feel like I need to add in a he said, somewhere,
Exactly.
things like that. Or just like you where the word said is there, all these like, the redundant words and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I totally get that. Well, I really appreciate this peek into your creative process for all these things because it's been really fascinating. But it's going to get more fascinating because we're going to pry open your brain and we're going to create something that has never existed before. Pretend I'm a toddler asking you for a story, right? You just got to come up with it, or I'm going to start screaming. I'm not actually going to do that. So, but we're going to channel that mood, right? And just watch your neurons fire and come up with something. All right, yep, get a drink. We're gonna hit this.
All right.
So we're gonna do some pitch storm, and I'm gonna just introduce the game for everybody with a little thing, and then we'll get on it, right? So here we go. Boom. Next up, we're going to play some Pitch Storm. This little exercise provides us a live, real-time look into our guest's creative brain. This is a fully random event. No hints, no notes shared, no nothing. All about creation in real time. Neurons firing at a randomized prompt to create something from absolutely nothing at this very moment in time. Guests are given a random character, a random plot, and must pitch these two things as a story, as detailed as their heart desires. Once the 30-second pitch is expired, there will be two random wrinkles thrown in, and you must repitch the story with those random wrinkles included. That's where stuff gets really wonky. At the end, we'll rate the pitch on a scale of heck yeah to heck no, and deem whether our guest is destined for fame or glory or needs to head back to editing. So audience heckling is permitted, join in and all that kind of stuff. And you get 2 mulligans. So
Okay.
if there's a spin and you're like, I am not going to pitch that story, that's totally okay. I will respin. No shame in any of that. I just ask that you don't use 2 mulligans back to back. Because then you don't get them anymore, and then that gets really difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and get our view going here. The wheel of doom. Of creativity. So I have this split as characters A and characters B. They're fully randomized in 2 wheels. I just had to do that so this wheel would actually work. This software is great, but like a list of like 500 characters can be like a bit much. So I did the same thing with plots and the same thing with notes. So I'll let you pick on the characters and all that kind of stuff. It's really the only thing you can control, which in fact controls absolutely nothing at all because there are over 4 billion combinations of stories ready to tell.
Yeah. Let's
So
see how it goes.
are we going to go with A or B?
Let's do B for characters.
B for characters. All right. Let's spin it and see what we get. I need some spin music. Senior citizen swim team.
Okay.
All right. Plots A or plots B?
Let's do plot A.
Plot A. This can get really awkward.
Oh no.
Let's see what we get. Falling in love with a squid. Okay. A senior citizen swim team falls in love with squid. Do you want to respin either of these?
No, I think
We're going to run with it?
let's run with it.
I appreciate your bravery. So I'll give you 30 seconds and pitch me a story about a senior citizen swim team falling in love with squid.
Okay. So in the town of Sunnydale, you have their Sunnydale, it's Sunnydale, California, we're out by the beach, and the senior citizens there have the swim team. They're very passionate about swimming, but they're also very, very passionate about the environment, and they love the ocean, and they're also considered kind of the busybodies of the town. They're always getting into trouble. And one day they happen to see a squid that has washed up on the sand, and they all fall in love with this squid. They name it Squirt the squid. They love it. And so they've decided this is it. Squirt is now their mascot. It's their rallying cry for them to go to the senior swim team Olympics. They are going to be the oldest swim team in all of the Olympic teams. And they're all doing it rallying behind Squirt the squid.
Yep.
It's a very passionate story. Everybody is loving it. And it makes for really cute merch because we can sell Squirt the Squid plushies, and it works.
I'm really glad you didn't go with the romantic angle on this one. So thank you for that. This is going to be bad, but no, that was great. That was really good. Okay, so they fall in love with the squid that washed out. I'm invested now. So now let's throw in a wrinkle, and let's see how ridiculous this can get. Do you want to go with wrinkle A or wrinkle B? Where are we going?
Let's do wrinkle A.
All right, here we go. Oh boy, I sense something on the horizon. Everyone loves a long-winded villain monologue. What would that sound like? All right, we need an antagonist here.
We do.
So
we need the antagonist.
So hit me with the antagonist and their monologue. I'll give you 30 seconds.
All right, the antagonist here. He is the leader of the Olympic Committee, and he does not think that you should be allowed to compete in the Olympics if you're old enough. And so if you're too old. And so he has this monologue where he's like, you people need to learn that while age is a number, like age may just be a number, but I don't know, being over 50 or whatever has no place in my Olympics. I am not going to be responsible for all these injuries. And, yes, we tell people to have dreams, but you're too old to have dreams. I don't know. He just decides that. And then it must be his kid or his grandkid that falls in love with Squirt the Squid and is like, no, Dad, you have to let them in. And Squirt the Squid wins him over with his adorableness.
Look, I'm just saying, I see another kid's book in your future right now.
I hope not. So. I love this, but I'm like, it's a fun one. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, and fill up with the. That's a good one. Wrinkles are built in with the seniors. Yeah.
I don't know. I just picked. I see Philip saying 50. I'm like, I don't know. I just picked a number. It's probably closer to 70. I
got about 6 months left to be to not be on that swim team, and then after that, I'm on the team. I'm hanging out with Squirt the Squid.
There you go.
All right, let's throw one more wrinkle in, and then we'll bring it around with the big climax of the story and all that. All right, so we've got the villain. We get this is all worked geriatric league of their own.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm going for.
Everyone loves a sympathetic bad guy. How do we do that? Oh my goodness, you couldn't ask for a better setup right there.
I know.
That's beautiful. All right, give it to me.
All right, the head of the Olympic Committee, he is very against people, like anybody. I am going to stick with over 50 because obviously the swim team is much, much older than that. But he's like, no, if you hit a certain age, you're not allowed to compete. And we find out it's because his dad was a huge Olympic athlete. And right after he turned 50, he was competing in, actually maybe he went and climbed Mount Everest. and he didn't make it back. And this just traumatized our villain. And he is like, no, I am a villain, but I have a good side here, and I want to protect people. People are not, I'm going to save them from themselves. I'm not going to have any death on my hands. At least until Squirt the Squid comes along and shows his kids that you really should let people compete, and that they won't die. If they do die, their deaths aren't on your hands.
You know, I can see like the song at the end, and they're all just kind of arm in arm, and the villain's got his Squirt the Squid jersey on now. Like he's totally come. I love a good redemption arc.
There we go.
Yeah. Like what was it in Pixar? It was in Ratatouille, Anton Ego, right? Like what a great, like, oh, that was so perfect.
Him eating the Ratatouille and going back to his childhood.
I know, like it just, I'm like, yeah, please, that movie, I can't even. No, that's excellent. Bravo. Excellent. That was an excellent pitch. So yeah, too perfect. The geriatric league of their own. Hey, you want to do one more?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna clean slate right now. Do you want to go characters A or characters B?
Let's do characters A this time. Let's mix it up.
So hope you don't regret going for another spin on these.
I haven't used the mulligans yet, so
that's true. An arrogant prince transformed into a beast. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does. All right.
So let's go plots A or B.
Let's go plots B. Let's see what this prince who transforms into a beast does.
Ooh. Let's see. And we're going to go with makes contact with dangerous aliens. An arrogant prince transformed into a beast makes contact with dangerous aliens. Any mulligans? Any respin?
No, let's do this.
All right. Yeah, that's the right attitude for this game. All right, 30 seconds. You'll hear the chimes when it's up, and off you go. Give me a pitch.
All right. Once upon a time, Prince Stephen lived in a grand castle, but he came across a visitor one dark night who placed a spell on him after Stephen refused to let the visitor come into the castle. As part of the spell, Stephen was transformed into a hideous, horrible beast. Ashamed of himself, he withdrew into his castle, never to interact with humans. But he didn't know this. The person who came and placed the spell on him was actually a visitor from another world, an alien world. And he really wasn't actually transforming him into a beast. He was transforming him to look at like one of them. So
nice. All right. Okay. I like it. Let's keep it going.
Let's see what happens.
The juicy story. I'm ready to go. Okay, so wrinkle A, wrinkle B. Which one do you want first?
Let's do B.
Let's do B first.
Exactly.
In this quaint little town, there be pros. Now you're talking my kind of story. Let's see. This is all great, but the villain's plan should be to destroy the entire universe. Oh wow. Well, that got
okay.
All right. I mean, it's kind of working, right?
Yeah, it kind of is.
You'll hear the chimes and go ahead.
All right. So yes, the villains of the story are our aliens who have decided that Earth really isn't good for very much. We really haven't contributed much to our intergalactic peace. We really just stay on our own planet. We cause issues. So they have decided to destroy the planet. But the best way to destroy the planet is by transforming people on the planet to be aliens like them. So that way, when the planet, they can use them to destroy the planet and the aliens aren't actually on there. And they're just using the humans transformed into aliens as their suicide bombers kind of thing for the planet. And so it's going to be up to Prince Stephen to use his new alien powers, to stop the horrible alien overlords from destroying planet Earth.
Nice. All right. Yep. Use it as a gift. I
exactly.
like it. That's a great trope. Okay.
Right,
so let's
do it. Let's see what we got.
And see what our last wrinkle to this story is and bring it home with a good climax and satisfying ending. Let's add an invisible talking penguin that only the main character can see. What could possibly go wrong? Are we going to do this?
Yeah, Let's do
All
this.
right. No, you know what? I appreciate that. Let's let 30 seconds. You're gonna hear the chimes. Bring this story home for us. Go ahead.
Okay, so Prince Stephen, he's transformed into this beast. He's got all of these alien powers. He starts realizing that the aliens are actually like trying to destroy Earth. And he realizes he's kind of got a side effect from this alien transformation. He sees this little invisible penguin who's just talking to him and telling him information he doesn't really shouldn't know. It's all this secret information into how to defeat the aliens and what they're thinking and all this stuff. And so as the story goes on, we fall in love with this cute little invisible penguin, and we're wondering, is Stephen actually just crazy from turning into a beast alien? But then as we get to the end, we find out that the penguin is actually the spirit of these other aliens that were already destroyed, the penguin aliens that were already destroyed by the dark aliens. And it's the ghost of the alien queen who is there to help Stephen along his path to redemption and to fight back the aliens.
I love it. Yay, absolutely. This kind of has the vibe of like an alternate like a parallel universe Donnie Darko like kind of thing, like with like it's a penguin instead of a bunny,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. Bravo, Abby, bravo. I like it. See, that's what's so much fun about something like this, is because we're doing this creation in real time, and to me that's just like that's a really amazing human thing, where all of these ideas and all this stuff floating around is just starting out from absolutely zero, and within just a couple minutes you're forming it, you're speaking it, you're getting feedback, we're like getting through it. So Donnie Darko in space with a penguin. Yeah, so bravo to you. That was fantastic. So I'm going to let you go, and we're going to close this up. But before we do, is there anything else, any other thoughts you have in terms of creativity? Maybe for somebody out there that's, struggling, going through some of the same things with either the perfectionism or whatever, do you have some words for that person that's trying to, us writers, right? Do you have some words for that person?
I would just encourage us to just keep moving forward. Just keep working at it. Keep putting stuff down. As I think it was Jesse said earlier, done is better than perfect. Just get something down, keep working through it. And it's a quote, and I don't remember who it's by. I think it's by Scott Adams, who wrote the Dilbert comics. My husband mentions it a lot to me, and it's you always have to be willing to embarrass yourself. Great people get places by embarrassing, like by putting yourself out there and being willing to embarrass yourself. If you never put your work out there, you never put yourself out there because you're terrified of, oh, it's not perfect yet, it's not ready, I'm not ready. You're never going to make it. And so I would just highly encourage all of you, just keep working at it. Put yourself out there. The worst thing that's going to happen is people are going to tell you it sucks. And I've actually had that happen. One of my beta readers, who is amazing, could not make it through my first draft of my book. Could not, like, stopped partway through and was like, I can't. And so it's really hard when people say, hey, your work isn't good or it's not good enough. But if you just keep working at it and keep putting yourself out there, you will get better, and you will get to the point where your work, you won't have that response, and you'll never know unless you try. With some of the IPs I'm working with, I had no idea. I didn't think I would get a response back, or if I did, it would be like, who are you? Why are you emailing us? Right. I could never have guessed that some of them would be like, yes, we want to work with you. But you just don't know if you're not willing to put yourself out there and be willing to potentially be embarrassed. So.
Right. Your windstorm's kicking up. You cut out for a second at the beginning of that, but we got it.
Okay.
We're good. That is excellent advice. So I'm going to give you the floor for another 30 seconds or so, and let's just wrap this up and remind everybody where they can find you and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead, go for it. The floor is yours.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been an awesome evening. I've really had a blast. And thank you guys so much for all of you guys who are tuning in and listening to this or watching later on. I really appreciate you guys all being here. So if you want to follow me, I'm on social media. I'm on Twitch. I'm not Twitch. I'm sorry. X, the everything app. I keep wanting to call it Twitter still. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm not on Facebook. Facebook thinks I'm an AI and refuses to let me exist on their platform. I can't do anything about that. But I'm on any of those platforms. I'm at author AM Burk. I'm going to be posting. I'm recruiting my animals to post book reviews. So if you like animals and you like book reviews, that's the right place. And that's actually where you can hear about my work that's going to be coming out. I'm going to have kids' books coming out end of this year or hopefully early next. And then my debut novel, The Inventor, hopefully coming out sometime next year or the year after, depending on interest from agents. And then I am posting some thriller, crime, novellas, novelettes. I think I also have some short stories and whatnot that I'm going to be posting on Kindle Vella. Hopefully end of this year, but maybe early next year. I'm waiting on cover art for those, and then they should be up there. So best place to follow me is by any of my social media, or you can look at my website. It's amburk.com. It's an amazing website. My husband made it for me, and it's the best. And so I really like it. Feel free to check it out. I have some fun FAQs on there. I have a contact page if you want to get in touch with me. But yeah, best place to keep in touch with me is mostly social media. That's where I'll be giving you guys my updates. And then I'm hanging out in the Discord. I think in MIRTH Discord, I am author AM Burk or AM Burk. But if you see me anywhere else on Discord, I might be under Discombobulate. That's my other name. That's the name I used to stream under. So you may see me under that name as well.
Right. Well, thank you. And thank you so much. This has been a great night and really appreciate it. It was really awesome just hearing some of these stories and, some of the things that you're doing and working on and how you go about it. So a great conversation, and please, pretty please come back when we've got some answers on the IP thing and you can give us a little bit of news. Would love to have you back on. We'll roll through it again. And all that. So yeah, I had heard this too.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, that Amazon is looking to roll back their Vela support. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Not sure yet, but I'll be
we're authors. We find a way. Yep,
I'll be posting it somewhere. I'll figure it out. But it's
people talk about Ko-fi. I don't know much about it, but that's one. There's ways.
It's just tough with short stories and novellas and novelettes. It's you don't want to For me, I'm I hate putting them on and charging people for the whole thing when they're smaller. So maybe I'll just bundle them together.
I mean, it's a reason to start up a Patreon, to have some stuff that's free and some stuff that might be behind. There's lots of ways.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Created the great website. You guys can figure this. He got your camera working. We can totally do it.
He's awesome. And I'll say he's going to be coming on the show in a couple of weeks. So yeah, he's India Venom in the Discord. So he's making some video games. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, no, that's going to be awesome. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. But Abby, hang out and we'll see each other in the green room right afterwards, right?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, so here we go. And folks, thank you for tuning in and spending some time with us tonight. Special thanks to Abby for being a great sport and a wonderful guest. Highly encourage you to check out all of her work. Links to all the things are in the description of the video, YouTube and Rumble, as well as the calendar on the site. If you would be interested in being part of the MIRTHquake community and a guest on the show, it is easy. Head over to the MIRTHquake.show for all the deets, and hopefully soon we'll be prying your brain open and throwing it out on the internet for everyone to see as evergreen content for the rest of your life. What could possibly go wrong? So once again, thanks, Abby. Really appreciate it, and thanks everybody in the chat. You guys were on fire tonight, and really appreciate it. And we don't have a show on Thursday. It's Halloween. Nobody's going to watch anyway. But we'll have a group show Saturday night. So if you want to come and hang out and see some fun there, Jesse, you'll be in that one. And yeah, we've got some fun stuff planned. So I'll see you in the green room and in the Discord and all that. And good night, everybody.